Thank you.
We are now joined by the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning. You just heard Roger Stone right there. I'm not going to repeat exactly what he said. Thin as, well, I guess I'll repeat it. Thin as piss on a rock. That's what he says the indictment is. Your response?
Well, look, he's presumed innocent, but these are very specific allegations of lies and witness intimidation. They're matters that will be easily provable. These are not ambiguous statements. They're very detailed, and I think he's going to need a much better defense than the one you just heard. But look, I prosecuted a number of white-collar cases when I was assistant U.S. attorney. White-collar defendants always make some variation of the same argument, and that is, I have a perfectly innocent explanation for this fact, and as for this other fact, I can come up with an innocent explanation for that, and likewise for all these other facts. But whatever you do, don't look at their totality. But when you look at the totality of what's going on here, and you look at the chronology, we know that the Russians told the Trump campaign as early as April of 2016 that they had the stolen emails. We know that they offered dirt to the president's son, Don Jr., and he said he would love to have the Russian government help with that. And then we know that some person directed a senior campaign official to reach out to Roger Stone to find out what WikiLeaks had gotten from the Russians. And then, of course, you have the president publicly calling for the Russians to help with those stolen emails. And all of this taking place while Donald Trump is pursuing what would probably be the most lucrative deal of his entire life, and one that requires Kremlin approval, this Moscow Trump Tower. And then, of course, all of the above, lying about all of the above. 100 contacts, but probably 1,000 lies. And it's that bigger, broader picture that Mueller's looking into.
You laid out the bigger, broader picture, but as we said, so far, Robert Mueller, he's not charged anyone with directly conspiring with the Russians. Based on everything you've just laid out, that charge still isn't there, is it?
Well, you know, Bob Mueller has the advantage of a lot of evidence that we don't. We were really circumscribed in what we could look at. For example, we wanted to try to compel some of the witnesses that Mr. Stone alluded to come in and testify. We wanted to try to test what Don Jr. and others were telling us. We wanted to get phone records. We couldn't do that, but Bob Mueller has been able to do that. And I would expect, George, that if there is a conspiracy to defraud the United States, a collusion indictment, it would be the last indictment that Bob Mueller would seek, not the first. We'll have to wait to see what evidence he produces, but you certainly do have to ask the question over and over again, if there were innocent explanations for all of this, why all the lies? Why all the repeated efforts to get Russian help? And, of course, you have this symmetry of interest here where Donald Trump wants help from the Russians with his campaign. He wants help from the Russians to build this lucrative Moscow Tower. And the Russians want help from Donald Trump. They want sanctions relief. And all of this is going on at the same time.
Your colleague on the committee, Jackie Speier, Congresswoman Jackie Speier, told CNN that she believes that Donald Trump Jr. lied to your committee on at least 2 occasions. Do you agree?
Well, I'd like the special counsel to have access to Don Jr.'s testimony and determine whether it is evidence of false statements. I think, and I greatly appreciate the seriousness with which the special counsel takes lying to Congress. So I'll let Bob Mueller be the judge of that. But one of the first acts, if not the first act of our committee, will be to send all of these transcripts of all the witnesses to Bob Mueller so that he can consider whether additional perjury charges are warranted.
Are you confident that Robert Mueller and his team have not yet seen any of those transcripts?
No, I believe the special counsel has had access to the transcripts, but not for the purpose of use in a perjury prosecution. So that's what we want to make sure, that the special counsel has access to these transcripts and can use them for whatever purpose, including perjury prosecution or witness intimidation or obstruction of justice.
You mentioned that conspiracy to defraud the United States would likely be the last indictment that Robert Mueller would issue. There's been some speculation out there that Roger Stone may have been the last indictment for Robert Mueller. He doesn't have enough evidence to charge anyone in Trump's orbit for conspiring with Russia. If Robert Mueller concludes there was a cover-up, there was a lot of lying, as you just said, but no direct conspiracy, what is the appropriate next step? Should he just tell the Attorney General, no more criminal, we've concluded there's nothing else we can prosecute, that's it, end of story, or does the public need to know more?
Well, first of all, I think it's clear that Mueller's work is not yet done, and we can see clues of that in the grand jury activity, in the fact that with this Supreme Court case of this mystery state-owned firm reaching resolution, that there are additional documents that Bob Mueller wants to get. So I think there's more work that he has to do. But when he is finished returning or seeking indictments, then he makes, I hope, an extensive report to the Attorney General. And that report is going to have to be made public. And I think there is significant agreement among Democrats and Republicans, even if there isn't among the nominee for Attorney General, that that is too big to be buried. And we're going to use every device and compulsion we can to make sure that it's made public. I have to tell you, George, over the last 2 years, as the Justice Department has been providing thousands and thousands of documents, but tens of thousands of documents, in the Clinton email investigation to the Congress, acting on a subpoena or many subpoenas, I have made it clear to them that they're not going to be in a position, once the Mueller investigation is concluded, to say, no, Congress, we're not going to share with you any of the evidence that's produced.
That's sharing. Let me press you on that point, though, because when James Comey came forward after declining to prosecute Hillary Clinton, Democrats and others were quite critical of him for having that press conference, for laying out his reasoning in public. Why shouldn't that same standard apply to Robert Mueller?
You know, this is the point that I was raising in the Justice Department, which is when the Justice Department started sending FBI interview reports, or 302s, and then started to send text messages and other documents to the Congress by the thousands, that was in contradiction of the Department of Justice policy. And I warned them they were doing it, that they were violating their own policy, but they were setting a precedent that they were going to have to live by. It simply wouldn't be acceptable for the country that they would provide discovery in one investigation but not the other. And that's the position they put themselves in. But at the end of the day, the most important discovery is that report. But given that it's not guaranteed and that it may be that Bill Barr fights the release of that, we have to continue our own investigations in Congress, because one way or another, we are determined the public is going to know exactly what Donald Trump did, what his family did, what his campaign did, what the Russians did, and what we need to do to protect the country. Final
question. The president is insisting that after this 3-week period the government is reopened, that he's going to demand the wall again, perhaps declare an emergency if Congress doesn't provide it. Are you prepared to support any wall funding as part of a broader compromise?
I don't support any wall funding, but I do support border security. And, you know, the important thing I think to remember here is Democrats and Republicans can not only reach an agreement on border security, we already have multiple times. In fact, we agreed on conference reports that would set out the funding for border security. We sent multiple bills, you know, through each chamber with bipartisan support. The only thing that got in the way was the president was frightened off by Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh. And while we will negotiate amongst each other and with the White House, we're not about to negotiate with these conservative pundits. And therein has been the problem, but I'm confident and hopeful we're not going to see shutdowns again. And I think one of our top priorities is passing a bill to make that kind of shutdown impossible in the future.